allows is that we have the reports are live reports. That means they don't magically just appear at this point in time. They actually exist throughout the life cycle of the entire system. If there's no events that happened yet, they're in their default state, and then as events happen, they get updated. So if an hours report is being used later, you can make another instance of the same thing. And this hours report could appear a second time to show some information. But this is how we have to show information flowing by example. In other words, if we want to show that this event, timesheet submitted, affects the hours report, you certainly want the hours report later on in the life cycle, or have another one. But this view of this information is not affected by this specific instance of this event happening. So that example data is not possible to be shown here. And this is a data completeness. This is why we don't have backwards arrows, just like you don't have references going into the future in a Git repository. So this is one of the biggest issues of when people try to do event modeling when they've used something similar in the past, like event storming, etc. This is tracking information over time. And if the information from this event, while this type of event is related to that read model, the information does not pre-populate this event that happened, sorry, the state of this read model or view that happened before. So two choices. Well, A, we have to get rid of this arrow. There's no way that this arrow exists because we cannot time travel. Does everyone understand that? Any questions about that specific aspect of the event model? Everyone see how you correct this problem?
Yes.
And does everyone see why this is a problem?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. Okay. I will wait 1 minute for it. Can someone go ahead and highlight maybe in red all the backwards arrows if we have more than that instance? I think we have a first spammer. We have a number has entered the waiting room for this meeting.
Yeah, it's me, Adam. It's Dave Muirhead.
Is that a spammer or a real person? Oh,
That's
it's a
me,
phone number.
Dave Muirhead. Yeah.
Oh, hey.
I
it looked like it looked like it didn't have your name on it, so it looked like one of those Zoom spam things that they were talking about. But I guess it's pretty much impossible these days with the default admin, the admit feature they added. So Dave, that's you, right?
Yes, it is.
On the phone. Okay, perfect. Sorry, that surprised me a bit. Okay, cool. So, okay, let's not. If everyone understands that that's the purpose of, well, I guess I'll just highlight this in red, since others are not doing it. Let me. Why is that not? That's bizarre. I'm wondering why I can't make the link a different style. I guess it's a limitation of Miro. I can't seem to turn this. Oh, maybe I have to have this turned on first. Oh, no, wait. I need the select arrow first. That'll do it. Okay. As I said, I woke up with a major headache this morning. So pardon me if I'm a little bit slow. Okay, so that's not good. Any other issues that people have found with the event model? There's a couple more backwards arrows. And like I said, why are we doing that? in terms of this information, we have to not ignore why people did this and connected them. It's to show that these reports or views should be related and subscribed to by these specific happenings, these events that happen on a timeline. But the only way you can do that is to show that at the appropriate place and time so that we can trace the information through. So let's just take a look at what it is that we're updating here. Timesheet preview, invoice, right. So we have a number of cases where we would like to either do another instance of these 2 pages and views and processors being used later on. Or if it's not really crucial for this piece of workflow to be demonstrated at this point, we can move it to the right and get rid of the problem. So the invoice preview, do we want, I guess it might make sense to put the invoice previews a second time so that you can show what the default is, as well as when some things happen, how it changes, right? Because the data that we're going to see in the preview that we generate, so we're making a little invoice preview generated. I'm guessing it contains, so yeah, there it is. Some things are getting in the way. I'd like to move, here's another little point. I try to move the commands and the views below all of the actual screen mockups, because we have these kind of interesting things happening here where I really don't want anything but the left-right workflow of screens up at the top, and the blue and green stickies to be the glue between the 2 sides of an information system, the explicit view that users see and the implicit data storage, and how those 2 are linked. So kind of, at least this is what's worked for me and the projects that we have, is to always use these, although I have sometimes moved them up, but I've now kind of stopped that and put all of the green and blue stickies to be in the layer below. So yeah, exactly like that. So the reason that I do that is, it's a little bit easier to see the interaction timeline as well as to what is going. This is kind of like a gatekeeper for input and output, if you can imagine. The blue shows information coming into the system. The green shows information coming out of the system. And hopefully that makes sense. I think it helps. I don't know if we, of course, you can also organize these a little bit better. Feel free to play around with them just so that things don't get in the way. There we are. Okay. So one of the easiest ways to fix these red arrows, I can copy these pieces and move them somewhere to the right. Or did someone already do that? I think someone already did that. Generate invoice. Nope, that's a different one. Hours reports. What is this? Time updated. Okay, I think what we want to do is copy that and move it to the right. And then take care of that link that we had here. Now, which one did I copy again? Oh, the processor one. So if we take this and now move it over to where I copied it, now this should be okay. So, however, what we need to do is show the information being different in here. And likewise, we have one more here. The hours report. Well, this is an easy one. Usually it's these that we want to sprinkle in that are just final screens for a lot of things, such as a report. I generally tend to push reports, or at least start them off on the right-hand side. If I do want to show default values in them, I do put them in at the front part, but I certainly don't have these arrows going backwards. So if I copy that and move this report here. Oh, we have way more stuff people added. Okay, well, that's good enough for it to be here. So we'll move that here. And that way we can fix this arrow. And that'll make more sense because this has already happened in the past. And now I can just change the color back to black. And we're good. Yeah, also the thickness of these lines, but back down to what it's supposed to be. Okay, so does that make sense how I got rid of the back pointing arrows? We do have one more here, another hours report. I thought I changed that, but I guess I didn't. Oh, I haven't connected it yet. What is that event? Timesheet submitted and time updated. Oh, of course, yes. So this will also affect the same one, the hours report. So we can move that over as well to show the effects of this hours report. Perfect. I see Krzysztof is a fan of the square lines. So I think we'll see a few of the square lines being added by him. I tend to like the round arrows because sometimes I find that when you make the arrows, the lines square, they line up with the edges of some of the other boxes or timelines, and you can lose the connection. So anyway, that's your preference, really. The important thing is that you show the connections of where the data came from. All right, we want to not spend too much time on this, but I thought it was important to make sure we don't continue until the major sort of errors were addressed. And I think we're good, at least from the very first few that I've caught here. And I think people have organized this a little bit better. Now, we have a whole bunch of lines here. I'm not sure what their purpose is, but they're kind of irritating me. I think we might have squished some stuff. We can leave them if it doesn't bother you too much. But yeah, this looks good. Let's go over here to see if... so thank you, Sean, for doing this little part. And I was just thinking actually last night about, there's some arguments on Twitter about from UML people about how many different types of documents we need for different types of people. A lot of those types of documents, I think, end up being really good little descriptions like you would have in a blueprint, like, you know, the lower left or the upper left in a blueprint for a house has a little text section with some descriptions. Maybe it'll give you the materials or a suppliers list or something like that. There's no reason we can't do the same thing here and supplement the event model to be more of a blueprint. And for some of those things that people have highlighted about event modeling not fulfilling every possibility, it's like, okay, well, the few things that we do miss out on, we certainly can have as small text sections here. So, and the other things about infrastructure, if we have these systems below here, where we have client management. Oh boy, what happened here? I guess it's all client.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go, but I initiated the recording, so hopefully it will continue once I leave.
I think it should. You know, we'll restart again if the recording is not there. But I think it's the recording travels on the server side with, unless you're doing it locally.
No.
Did you say record to the cloud?
No, I said to the cloud.
Okay, well then that should be fine.
Okay.
I think we did that last time. Okay, thank you. I'll provide the recording shortly, and we'll see you hopefully this Thursday and for the other ones. Okay.
Bye.
Bye. So to continue, team management, user registration. We have we can just have it as I guess user system. We don't even have to do any of that. How do we want to name this? Bounded context, if you want to use DDD terms. What do you want to call these these shared responsibilities? What's a good name for a subsystem? Notice I'm using the word subsystem, not domain or bounded context. It's an organizational unit, you know, in a company. So, what is the name of a system? What's a good name for the system that would take care of team management, user registration, and project management? I'm not sure what project management is now, actually, if we even need that right now. That would be more admin, I think, right? Do we just want to delete these for now? Because
I think you can probably just put like people put user admin and project admin, right? So I can add users and teams, and that's all around user stuff. You could do that, and then creating projects might be a different person and different type of workflow. So that might be simple for now. You could combine them together or make them.
Yeah, this is a good point. So one of the things that I like about event modeling is that sometimes I have these grandiose ideas at the beginning that, oh, we're going to need a user management system for sure, and we're going to need a team management for sure. And even with large projects, you know, I thought, well, we're going to need a point of sale side and an inventory side. And in the end, we actually would have been better off keeping it all as one system. It's crazy. So this idea that everything needs to right away by default be a separate bounded context, separate domain, even a separate deployment unit is entirely out of thin air a lot of times. And until you start to exercise and mold the information, and more importantly, the information flow within the system, you don't really know. I think that event modeling gives us the greatest insight to start to make those decisions. But even then, it's still premature optimization to make some of these bounded contexts. I think the reason you might want to do that is to keep terminology separate. And if you're talking about, I can't have user management using the same terms as the time tracking, because the vocabulary that I want to use when I'm doing time tracking might overlap with the user management. And so there we can make the bounded context argument to say, I do want those in separate swim lanes because the terminology is going to trip me up, not my implementation. The implementation doesn't have to take into effect. And what I'm saying really is that I can take a couple of these swim lanes with their events and deploy and have them as a single deployed unit. But when I'm elaborating about how I'm going to organize the information, etc., I make no difference really about that. So I can have, you know, a view looking at two of them together, but for the purposes of interacting with the business and explaining what's going on with the user management versus team management, they see that they're separate. And when they're talking about, you know, a user in the top swim lane here versus a user in the bottom one, they know the difference because they have that context as to what swim lane is for what purpose. Does that make sense for anyone that's familiar coming in here from the domain-driven design perspective? Rick, does that make sense?
I think it makes sense, Adam. it correlates to ubiquitous language, right? I mean,
yeah, exactly. The first chapter of the Blue Book, of course. I don't even want to scare people off with the ubiquitous language term. That's a fancy long word. Must be a difficult book to understand, and people check out mentally. Something I drop that from my vocabulary as well. I'm unlearning the DDD stuff, which is crazy because doing DDD and event sourcing stuff always requires you to forget the traditional stuff. I'm forcing myself to forget even more, and rely even more on common English and things
I
like
like
that.
to use the language of the business problem is probably better.
Exactly. Yeah, that's really good.
So let's look at that from this example you got. So there is the business problem that we're focusing on, the core domain, which is really around time tracking of work on projects for clients, right?
Yep.
And then we have other administrivia type stuff that we want to do, like creating our users and our teams, but those are more internal to our team. So our team management, like just imagine.
Yeah, it's a context. You're going into the bubble of managing that. Yeah, so I could have an admin for a specific project.
As a business, we just want, like, when we hire people, get people onboarded, all that kind of stuff, that's our own business, right? So that's a domain. And then once we have our team, like who's working on what and what they're doing time, that's actually the areas of the problems we want to focus on. So we would want to at least make a bounded context and just call it like our own internal administration or whatever, and at least put all that stuff in one, maybe split it out later if it's too complicated.
Yeah.
So
we can put it in one.
You know, so we could start with that and say that's and what part fits in that, right?
Yeah, we can. So it's interesting because I think stepping back again just to see what's happening here, which is a really awesome point that I try to make, is how this event modeling satisfies these different roles. So what you're talking about is exactly that. The conversations I want to have with business people to make sure they understand how the information is organized, but it parlays into the conversations I want to have with the developers to talk about the teams that are responsible for the implementation. And if we're going to have all the force of Conway's law, when we do end up dividing our 10 developers into 2 or 3 teams to look at the different aspects, we're going to have to make those adjustments for the fact that Conway's law will prevail, or at least if we fight it, we're going to have some inefficiencies, and we're going to have to make sure that whatever tasks we give these people, maybe there's an opportunity there to have related things being in the same deployed units. And so we might then mark up the event model saying that team 1 is going to take care of swim lanes 3 and 4, and team 2 is going to take care of the remainder. I hope that makes sense, because that's going to have an implication to some scope. And the reason I say that is when we have cross boundary, when we get into the implementation, you'll see this, and this is something that we hit with our teams as well internally, is when we make those what seem to be arbitrary assignments to separate teams, we get into the pub sub of the events happening in one subsystem to the next. Because usually what happens is that each team would get their own instance of event store to store their events for whichever swim lanes that they're responsible for. Now, if you have to then subscribe for a read model into the other team, to publish something, let alone having a public schema translation, you will need to represent that external event in your solution. So we usually have a subfolder in events called external. And this is where we have the schemas for the events that are coming in from systems outside of our own team. That ends up having an impact on scope, because you need to update the event handlers that are going to populate the right read models and things like that. Usually they stand on their own. Those read models are ones that are built specifically for showing what the information looks like coming in from the other one. Sometimes they're translated to be interpretation events, which might limit the amount of data coming through and things like that, or transform it. But usually it's a read model that then adds supplemental values for the commands within our own domain, our own deployment unit. And on aggregate, we found that these events that occur in other systems are about half the cost of implementing a regular event handler or command handler. So we have a velocity number for integrations between domains, which is pretty cool. And domains I'm using loosely here. I'm talking about deployable units, and I'm guessing if those deployable units are best described by a unit of storage, such as an instance of event store or a cluster of event store, or whatever your database table is for the events for that particular deployed unit. Any questions on that? Because it's quite an important point that later on with this project we'll for sure see if we do split that up. Our audience has a lot of domain-driven design experience, so I'm hoping that we're going to get some interesting questions about that and explore that. But needless to say, we're quite a ways in, almost an hour in. So let's go to our Slack. I'm going to stop the sharing, and I'm going to find my Slack channel, and I wonder if we can do. Let's see here. If I can do a vote, what is this? Shortcuts, where's the vote? Is there a little action item for vote? I saw someone doing this the other day on Slack to get some voting going, but I'm guessing we could have, oh, there's poll, there it is. First of all, let's just answer to this thread to see what stacks, which stacks, and maybe we can do thumbs up on or something like that to count the votes. Which stacks do you want to use? You know, vote for one or more, that's fine. Use thumbs up to count. Let me just share this again so that people that are looking at the recording understand what I'm doing.